papers out, Secretary Chu, the guy who's the Nobel Prize winner in physics, said in the year 2040, America would no longer be growing agriculture in California if the present trends continue. So, frankly, I think that the clock is ticking on us. And we have police-state measures in place, just like we can have a Supreme Court which disenfranchises lots of people. There was a civil war over slavery. By 1896, the Supreme Court had legalized Jim Crow in the most grotesque way. And there's a recent book on it by a guy named Douglas Blackman called Slavery is by Another Name, which is also worth a look, along with Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, about the current prison system. And if you take my book and those two books, you might get a picture of how horrific racism and many police-state measures are here. And if we fight it, we can stop some of this. So I think it's very important not to be fatalistic and not to think, gee whiz, you know, I'll just say, I think the most important thing is we have to have a movement against the coming war in Iran. And we have to have a movement, just like we had a movement against segregation here, against cooperation with Israeli apartheid. We have to force people to divest from Israeli apartheid. We have to put a high price on Israeli apartheid. We have to give people the idea that their friends here, and I speak as a Jew, are not friends to apartheid. That we want healing and human rights for everyone in Palestine and Israel. But we do not want apartheid. And I think if we do those things, it'll make a difference.
Question in the back?
Hi.
Benson Harding, Dr. Harding is wonderful, but war is terrorism.
Amen.
Yes. Some time ago, Gloria Steinem wrote an article that I wish that she'd do an update ASAP. Authoritarianism begins at home, the Nazi connection. And it's the history of the fact that there was a feminist movement in Germany at one time. There were clinics that were closed. Women were encouraged to stay at home and have male children for the war machine, basically. And that's all documented. And it was a beautiful article, but I haven't heard or seen anything about it since. In the midst of all the talk about what's legitimate rape and so forth and so on, you don't hear the history. And I even think that the Tea Party and many of its attitudes and the way those attitudes are implemented in reality echoes what happened in Germany before Hitler in terms of feminism and the issues that really relate to all of us. The bedroom issues that have been so obvious in this particular election season.
It's a really good point. There was a German Revolution in 1919. The Weimar Republic was formed, and there was actually a big uprising by the workers led by the Spartacists, which was suppressed. And there were many very advanced things that happened in Germany. So the Nazis had a war against women. They murdered every gay person they could lay their hands on. That was part of the genocide. It was against Jews, Slavs, Unionists, Communists, gay people. There are real parallels. In Chile, they used to think they were the great democracy and nothing could happen to them. Allende get elected, and he played ball with the United States. Nixon shouldn't have murdered him. Kissinger shouldn't have murdered him, but they did. And it all changed for a long time. And I will just say about it, because this is a debate about whether one, and for many years in my life I agreed with the slogan, which was an old SDS slogan, vote with your feet, vote in the street. And I still agree with it in the sense that no movement from below, nothing decent from above. Obama told the truth, that really without a movement from below, he wouldn't be the lot of good. And he helped disable the movement that supported him after the election. But he still tried to do some good things, did do some good things. But you might think that it can't happen here and that it won't be long-lasting if it does happen here. And one of the things that's worth studying fascism some, when you get it, it's bad. It lasts, and a lot of us end up dead. And in the current situation, we don't have that much leeway. I mean, what I'm describing about what is going to happen with the war in the Middle East, I mean, Fukushima is out of control right now, and it's still leaking radiation merrily. And we are about to have a huge hurricane on the East Coast, and there are 13 nuclear plants in its path. Okay? So the question of whether we can reverse this, the madness of American capitalism and militarism, is actually a real big question. But again, I would just say, you know, there are things that we can do. I think we can build a movement. I think it is often right, and I think anybody who wants to vote their conscience, you know, go ahead, right? But I would just say, I wouldn't vote my conscience in California this year, right? Except that my conscience tells me that actually it would be better for the world if Obama is president than if Mr. Romney is president. And certainly not in Colorado.
You mentioned the Israeli founding slogan about land without people. I've heard it said what they really meant was a land without a people. They knew that there were individuals there, but they didn't think of them as of an ethnic nationality deserving of anything. The other thing I wanted to ask was, we've heard Norman Finkelstein and we've heard Michael Lerner and subscribed to his Tikkun magazine. You three are all pretty much on the same page in this regard on Israel-Palestine, aren't you?
It's a good question. I think Norman is on the same page with Norman. I like Norman very much, but I think Norman is on his own page, to be blunt about it. But your first point, look, let's take this as a view. Let's say that there were some Jews who were stupid enough to take up European racism, and so they thought that Arabs were not people. If you can figure out a defense of that, good luck. I would say that the reason Israel was set up in the horrifying way that it was, we went to the national park, as it is called, which the Jewish National Fund has provided trees for, with the buildings of Lifta, right there in Jerusalem, where all the Palestinians were driven out. But you know, they were wealthy Palestinians, and Ben-Gurion apparently had a Joshua fixation. So he didn't kill as many of them. But up on the hill there's Der Yassin, where they massacred everybody. And, you know, is it as bad as King Leopold in Belgium, in the Congo, where he murdered 20 million people? No. It isn't as bad as that. On the other hand, you have to make the comparison. It's sort of like the defense of Israel. You know, we're not Nazis. We don't just murder them. Yeah? Good. Glad to hear it. Right? I thought you were Jews. Maybe I missed something. So, most Jews were like I.F. Stone, who's my sister-in-law's father, and like Judah Magnus, and thought that really the way to peace in Israel passed through the Palestinian villages, not over them. And most Jews were radicals who did not support Zionism until the Nazis and the utter racism of the United States of America and other places. Roosevelt turned back boatloads of Jews from Europe. That's what Ship of Fools is about, so that Hitler could say, you don't want them either. And the history of anti-Semitism in the United States is dazzling. But the genocide created a situation where a lot of people felt like, well, we need a place to be safe. I have a friend who was a radical with me once upon a time, whose parents, she's a philosophy professor, whose parents were in the underground in Germany when she was a child, and who were almost killed many, many times by the Nazis. And she wants a Jewish homeland. I listened to Sami Awad, who was a great human being, a gift to the world, speak about these issues. And he liked the kind of nonviolence represented by Palestinians refusing to go along with Israel's declaring that the time would be switched at the end of the summer. They'd have daylight savings times, and the Palestinians showed up on the old time for the next week, and Israel went nuts. And he really liked this thing. They had a lot of consternation about it. And there's a lot of thinking. Kobe Snitz, the anarchist against the wall, they showed Avatar in Israel. So several of them dressed up as the Na'vi. And the slogan was, well, so if you can sympathize with the Na'vi, how about the Palestinians? That didn't have as big an effect on the Israeli soldiers. I guess they were too busy shooting at them. But it was clever. Anyway, what he says is that it's he, in order to understand Israeli Jews, went to Austria and went to Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. And he was there, and he listened to an Israeli tour guide with a group of children. And apparently, he asked somebody to translate. The guy used the phrase hara, which means shit in Arabic, apparently, several times. And what he was saying was, this is the genocide. This is what your grandparents were killed in. It will happen again if you don't arm to defend Israel. The Arabs will do this to you again. And the mania of Israel, or, you know, if you think about trauma and you think about post-traumatic stress and you generalize it and you build it into a people for 1,000 years in Europe, and then they show up in Israel, perhaps it's not too hard to understand that there's a lot of craziness and that there are powerful people who manipulate it and use it in the most evil ways. So one of the great principles of nonviolence is to stop the evil acts, but to create a future in which you have not destroyed the evildoers. Because when you destroy the evildoers, A, you don't know, some people can change, and B, you destroy a lot of other people, and you make everybody crazy at you. So nonviolence has its defects, but there's a lot of merit in it. And you can learn to be nonviolent the way Sami Awad. Sami was very critical of some of the people in the villages in the following way. He said, you know, they're doing good things, but their nonviolence is tactical or strategic. It's not principled. Now, actually, I didn't hear anything unprincipled in the villages myself, and everybody made the distinction between the Israeli state and Jews. And as far as it went, we all got treated very, very well and talked to people, and they certainly appreciate Kobe. And we all hung around one night in Nabi Saleh at one guy's house with a bunch of these people from Anarchists Against the Wall who were demonstrating with him, and the villagers and our delegation, discussing very advanced questions about nonviolence and tactics and what you should do. It's very interesting. And I didn't get a whiff of the racism that I get with Israelis. But Sami Awad really did a profound thing in journeying to Bergen-Belsen and thinking about it in a deeper way, which is he isn't out to take out anybody, he's out to heal the world. So I would hope that I could join his cause.